This is an update prior to construction drawings, just to appraise you of a few things to keep in mind when you begin to put this together. This project is pretty similar to one we did a couple years ago over in another subdivision. The main difference is that I think we have more height to deal with here because you have this transom window up here. So that was one of the main differences between, besides, you have a double gable out there. And this was their place, and that is what we did there. So over there we had a flat section of roof up here because we just didn't have a lot of height to work with at all. And here I think we have a little bit more. In any case, this has been put together, and this should all be very accurate, within an inch or so of what exists out there. So the idea will be is to, ideally these fluted pieces are recut so that those flutes end prior to this plinth. But in any event, that plinth is moved up like that, and then our roof is going to be occupying in here. But first, when I built that beam for the roof, I keep the beam inside these corner boards, these plastic corner boards here, about an inch inside those. So the corner board continues on and dies against the bottom of this little 1-inch soffit or whatever it is that carries the gutter over to that rear downspout. Now this is this traditional box beam framing with the main members in here, and this is regular framing that I realize out there that's probably going to be just an aluminum clad box without this sort of thing going on here, so that's maintenance free aluminum. And then there's a J channel right around that and J channel around the ceiling up here. But in this structure here, we're going to keep our ceiling to the top of that doorway right there, which that's a good, the other ceiling in that other place, the ceiling had to be built down here. So we have a lot more room to work with in terms of height here. And that is why I automatically called out 8-inch finished 8-inch columns, 7.5 or 8-inch columns, and 7.5 or 8-inch beams here. The beams die inside the porch there. These railings down here, though, this is something different. Those are not going to be able to be centered on those corner locks because they're going to be outside the columns here. And so finally, before it was all said and done, I just gave up and put a newel post at that end, which made the most sense, and I should have gone to that right away. But that's what I did there. Now here is something else to think about or to know about. This is the existing porch slab and its sidewalks, and I didn't take a reading with a level to see how much this fell, but this should be within a couple inches. But when you build the new porch, that's the new porch according to what we have right now, built out over, and you can see that we're going to need some more stairs going down, and this sidewalk's going to have to drift down here quite a bit, like this. Next, I had drawn this like this on the last plan, but CJ did something different over there, and it makes more sense than all this rigmarole here. And that is just to have this board really carrying this gutter, and this is just drip edge here. However, I would keep this in siding. I would keep this triangle piece in siding just for the separation that I think is kind of necessary. It looks better in the siding. You'll have some that you take off from behind this roof. So that's how I would do that on both sides. On this side here, same, I had that thing there, and we'll just go to something simple like that. And also, I'm going to go back here, a couple of different things real quick. I think that these columns, and I don't know if you're going to do this sort of thing at this house here, which that's possible too if you like, but these columns should have some sort of capital, I think, for this sort of house, and probably even more so for the house that we're working on. So I think those should have some sort of capitals, just those plastic ones that you put around and glue up there. And the same with the base. And for that reason, when you need this base down here, I would have run this floor on out so that you pick up that dark horizontal line. And so that has to be accounted for, and that's why you have to build this fascia board out so that those decking boards can come out and have a good 1-inch margin past the edge of these bases, if the bases were on here. That is the only improvement I would suggest, and I think that this here, it's a little different, I suppose, but I think it'll look better in the siding to match the existing over here at Pew Court. And so this was the best according to what I measured with, the driveway's not shown here, but according to the topographical information available and what I was able to calculate, this is kind of what it looks like it's going to shape up with. And these steps are kind of steep. Well, I mean, they're 8-inch risers. Or no, these are 7.5-inch risers. And I think this develops a little bit better here, yeah. So yeah, these are 7.5-inch risers down here, and then this driveway or this sidewalk twists and slopes down, and it should finish level across the whole front of those stairs, ideally. If you wanted to make this stair a little bit wider, I suppose you could. Right now these planks on here are about 5 feet. So if you go wider, it's, you really could only just go, another 3 inches wider on each side. I did not place this column, this middle column, I did not place that exactly symmetrical from the door. And I kind of have it drifted over that way a little bit. This little newel post is splitting this distance exactly in half. And that's about it on that thing. Oh, I know. I also, when you're doing all this excavation, you're going to have to put this new driveway or this new sidewalk in. I think it would probably be a wise idea to put in some drain tile from these two downspouts here and get that over here and down slope. So, because that's what I would do if it were me, just because it makes good sense. And then these are the final kind of interpretation of what this would look like, and it's really nice that this has this space, a nice section of space above these window heads. I mean, we didn't have that to work with at Lowndes Court, but we do here. And it's also nice that we don't have that flat section up there. This becomes a much simpler construction. All 2x6s everywhere, really. Ceiling, roof, floor joists. Ceiling could probably actually be 2x4s. Ceiling, you see the ceiling is vinyl, and so it's run this way because that's only available in like 10 or 12 foot lengths, and there's no way to seam it end to end. If it were wood ceiling, it would run the long ways like this. But this is in keeping with the whole rest of the house, and it's fine. And they have some nice product actually, but I don't know if you should actually depart from what is on these soffits up here, frankly. And this is where you can really see this looks much better with this colored like this rather than if this were all white. From this side you don't really even have that much exposure because of the trees and so forth. But from this side here, this will definitely look better in siding. And I did carry the corner board. I did separate. I didn't try to have it come out and be one piece with this. I had the corner board come down and separate that from this, and I thought that was the best way to live with that. Yeah, I wouldn't make those columns, so these are shown, these columns are shown are 8, so you possibly could downsize those to like 7.5 finished, even 7 finished, but I wouldn't get much slimmer than that. I have no idea why the porch is red. It's just the way that photo developed. It'll be another day before I adjust the construction drawings, but otherwise this is ready to go. I really like this, that we just sloped this right up to here, and this is a 212. It's a little bit more than 212 pitch, which is fine because then you put ice and water shield on that, and that's still within the code. So I think that's it. I really liked how this came out actually. So I will, unless there's any questions or any adjustments. Oh, I have shown the land, just according to what it was up here and kind of what I could calculate from, and down here it's set by the topographical maps. But up here, I don't know if you want to, run your own raised bed again to shorten this distance here or not. But a person could put lattice work, not that diagonal stuff, but maybe 2" by 2" heavy-duty lattice could be put under here if they're going to leave this go all the way down to grade like this. So I think that's it. Any questions, feel free to call or email. Thank you. Okay, so after that first film, or that first 10 minutes of this film, I began to put the construction drawings together, and I noticed several things that were going to have to be addressed or corrected or whatever. And so I made a few slides along the way, and I'll try to share this with you as quickly as I can so that it's not too boring. But there are quite a few things that I did, and actually the construction drawings themselves, just because of a few little things, the corrections for one thing that I made, a few other things, those have been updated to a later dated March 30th set of plans. Some of this has to do with aesthetics things, and other parts of it have to do with more things that CJ will want to know or the builder will want to know. So first of all, because I wanted to keep these beams, these finished beams, inside this corner board like this, and the height of this asks for these 8" columns, which means 8" beams, 8" finished beams. So the railing is not necessarily, but is centered on those columns. So that requires some build out on these deck edges in order to pick up these bottom bases for these columns. First of all, when I began to put together how we were going to support these stairs, how we're going to hang these, and put this ledger board here, this 2x8 or 2x8, it was going to project in front of, it was even intruding into the 1x10 deck frieze out here. So it was too far forward and it needed to move back. And this plan was like the one on Lowndes Court. This was using bolted connections for to hold beam A to these 6x6 columns. But in this permutation, because we need to move this back, because I want to just bolt that to that column, that's the easiest way to support that. And even if an argument could be made that instead of using bolts you could use verticals, which I'm sure that could probably be done, but it still needs to move back. So what I've done, and we can't move this column up here is centered under that beam B at the top, and beam B, that is dictated by the ceiling height interfacing with that door and the height of the rafters needed up there. So that can't move. So I got rid of those bolts and went to this LPCZ, it'll be a 6C, to attach. And instead of attaching all these with bolts, we'll be attaching it with that LPCZ. And so that enables us to, for one thing, to cut these columns down. These 6x6 columns, we're able to cut those down now to the bottom of this beam A, which are 2x10s. And when we do that, these connectors, you can situate that beam anywhere across the top of this post. So I have moved it to the center, allowing us to put our ledger back here. This is just the bottom frame in case you want to hold up this whatever screening you use down there. And for that LPCZ, you can use this lesser expensive one. You don't have to use Z-Max. This galvanized is fine for that. And by the way, it's been my experience with almost all of these Simpson parts, that they can be had for less money. Here it's $6.02, and I think it was somewhere around $8, whatever it was, at Home Depot from connectorsonly.com, and you just order it and it arrives a couple days later, because it comes right out of Columbus, right out of the Simpson warehouse in Columbus. So this is the closest you can get actually from ordering directly from Simpson. I don't know how Wreckworth's prices compare for hardware, but historically this connectorsonly.com has been the one for me. So for 6 of these it was going to be $36 or between $36 and $48. And because I was curious really how these prices compare, I went over and added the necessary. If you had used bolts instead, a bolted connection instead, I added those, and it comes to $43. So if you can get these from Connectors Only, it's going to be less expensive. I mean, you have to have the nails to hold them in, or screws, or whatever you want to use. But this is going to be a better connection overall, and it's going to be a similar price. But returning to this now, then once this happened, I knew that we're going to have blocking up here to hold this up and to hold that freeze board on. And this is how I was looking. So what I did is, this was a 2x8. I switched that to a 2x10 and moved it down so the top of this is to the top of those. And actually you can add another bolt through here. And this uses a Simpson part also. I think it's called a DJT. It's called out here, but you can't see it. And that assembles with 5/8 machine bolts. So you'll still have to buy 6 5/8 machine bolts in the assembly, the nuts and washers, for this ledger board. But this is going to be an easier fix to block this out for these deck edges up here. And unfortunately, the way it works out, and I suppose a person could horse around with this and make it work, but it works out to 3 3/16, 3 or 3 1/16, right around there, 3. But it's not 3 1/2. And so because I can tell it'll make sense, I will adjust the plans a little further so that this just becomes 2x4 framing here. And that's consistent all the way down across the whole front of that deck. In the stair section, it's going to be up a little bit because you've got this higher ledger here. But everywhere else, this will be 1.5 by 3.5. This will be 2x4 framing. And the difference will be that this overhang from the edge of the column base will get 5/16 of an inch wider, which is no big deal. As long as you keep those column bases, you know, as I'm showing, which is similar to what the products I actually showed you. So that is what I'll adjust that one more time, just because that makes sense. And that's how that'll be framed there, at least it seems to me. That's what should be done. And there's that ledger, that 2x10. I call it a 2x8. Maybe that's what it is, a 2x8. And it is in blue here. I think it's a 2x10. But then the rest of this, the front end of this here, is shimmed out similarly. This is the ledger in the background, and this is what's happening out there, except this will say 3.5. And on this end here, then you will just adjust. For one thing, a couple things to notice. Here's the LPZ holding this onto that. And these upper columns on the left and right, the outside edges of those actually align with the outside edges of the 6x6s. And then beam A is cantilevered over here, and you can cantilever it over here as far as you need to pick up this last joist, this 2x10 end joist that will travel back to the house, and that you will use one of these concealed hangers to hang it there. Remembering from our other diagram, we're going to have 3.5 in here, and that's going to end up with probably about 1 inch and 5/16 or 1 inch and 5/8 projection from the outside of this. And that should just be measured from the center or whatever, but that is where that extra 5/16 is going to end up at the front end, and that's where it's going to end up back here as well, right up here. And you're just going to project this beam as far as you need to hold that last joist to pick up your 1x10 deck freeze. And it can go as long as you want, really, but obviously all you need is to make those margins equal. And backing out, and this will probably be in the new plan because I've already drawn it just to demonstrate it. This is the looking out from in the porch. Here's the 2x10 stair ledger, and it does require these 6 machine bolts to hold it up, but then that's the end of the road. That holds up everything except for this slab down here that holds up the bottom. And the important thing to note is that these two end 4x4s here, those line up with the outer edges of these 6x6s. And I mean, if you follow the diagram, if you follow the dimensions of the floor plan, you'll end up with this. But if there's any confusion, that's what's happening there, is that those are coming down where their edges are aligned with the outside edges of this, and the center column is actually aligned with that center of that. I actually forgot that I added these notes already. And this is a good situation with these columns cut off, because it allows us to locate these upper columns anywhere along that beam. You might have to be a little bit careful with this situation here, maybe lay out the joists so that they don't interfere with those, or so you don't have to have joist hanger on top of that. But otherwise, that's the way that shapes up from that end. And the next thing I had to cover is again a construction thing, and it has to do with demolishing that there. One of the things I'd like to see is this porch to be down just like it is here, at least 6.5 to 7.5 inches down from that threshold. And so I'm pretty sure that this was poured separately from those foundation walls, and it should be able to be demolished off of there pretty quickly, or pretty easily. I don't think it's all one, because of this projection. I don't think they did that, but I may be wrong. But in the event I'm right, here it is in section view here, and you can see that possibly you might have to notch the bottom of these 2x8s just a little bit, and they shouldn't give you a headache about that. They would almost pass as 2x6s. So if these are just notched a 1/2 inch, if that wall doesn't want to just knock off, the top of that doesn't want to knock off easy, that's what I would do. I would just don't let them contact this wall at all, just notch them up over there, the minimum required. And as long as you have 6 inches up here, those are still going to carry the load. That's a top slab, and that would have to go away to keep this more of a traditional step down onto the porch, and to avoid the rigmarole of the secondary beam in front of that slab, or screwing burring strips to that slab. That just eliminates all of that sort of rigmarole. Next is this whole series of photographs, and this does deal with more aesthetic type things. And one of the first things I noticed when I started making the construction drawings is our railings on that lounge porch were shown lower because they weren't necessary. It wasn't necessary to have them, and I think they were eventually installed at 36 inches anyway, but I had been showing them at 33, and so this automatically raises those to 36, unless you're going to raise this land up to where it is less than 30 inches from here to the grade. Those are going to be required. And the stair, handrail, and these guards, those are going to be required if this is any more than 3 risers, and I'm currently showing it as 4. Not that you wouldn't want them even if it were just 3. And so this is these, and I don't know, I keep auto-correcting this and it changes more each time, but this has to do with this under the skirting, and it just shows various applications and how that impacts the thing. And this is a couple of these traditional looks here. And I did not show a horizontal look, and I'm not going to start messing around with that now. I showed these 2 looks mainly. And then I shifted the camera a little bit on this. And I definitely didn't care for that, where I changed the color of that bottom. Finally, and I know this has been an exhaustive review, but finally a few things with regard to the aesthetics again. This beam, this is shown as clad aluminum here, and that's presumed that that will be the case. That's what's happening everywhere else in the house. This more traditional look had this box beam situation here, and that's the most elaborate, probably, is where there's a little crown mold inside as well. But this here looks just good to me, and probably is what this house asks for. I think these capitals and bases will be required for sure. And I noticed that I had forgotten to put these column wraps. Usually come with some sort of, or you get them with some sort of a base, and that should also be included as part of this to make it complete. If you didn't buy these straight up columns, and these are manufacturer columns, fiberglass reinforced plastic columns, and if you were just going to build those, and I assume you are just going to make those boxes and then clad them with aluminum, you can still get these tops and bottoms if you make those the right dimensions to match these, or have these on site before you box those. They have a variety of these, and I wouldn't use these. These are more for a different, they go up under the beam where they don't project over in a traditional fashion like this. So I would stay away from that sort of a thing, and these little chintzy kind of things, and I would either use that or what I'm showing, which is this Tuscan. And you can mix and match these, that's up to you. And keep in mind, you also, because if you just get those two bases, you won't have this neck mold here, which is kind of traditional as well. So you want to make sure that you pick that up as well, hopefully. And as I said earlier in the film, I'm not sure exactly how this will work out here. If you think you can get away with 3 risers, then you'll have to adjust things accordingly on these stairs by the 10 3/8. Just go back 10 3/8 with everything. And then the last little thing that's just annoyed me is that I did not have these, because the way I situated those, if you did it this way, where you were using these post bases and having 4x4s come up through there and then using sleeves on them, if you weren't using bolt-on aluminum railings and so forth, I was showing these and located them, and all I've done in the new plan, so that's one little adjustment, those little things there, I move those forward to the 1/4 inch required, and that makes these evenly on these corners here. And that apparently finally is the end of that. So hopefully that gives you lots of information to work with. If you have, I'm just showing that vertical skirting, but if you have any questions during any of this, feel free to give me a call. And that is all. Thanks very much. Alrighty then, this should be the final permutation. When I started to draw this section looking out from the porch, I recognized that we weren't going to be able to attach the 4x4 posts for these newels, and CJ and I have already had a conversation about this, so that is going to change. Otherwise you would have to have bolt down columns, and these are kind of expensive. So this is what the alternative was, which was drop that column and that beam down, and then bring the joists out over in a more conventional fashion. You can just nail these joists to that beam with 310s, but then it's how do we hold this? The stringer support changes a little bit. For one thing, now that we have that, we can frame those posts down into the floor as required and block them in. But in terms of stringer, what we're going to do with that is just take that same 2x10 stringer header. For one thing, we're not going to need these Simpson DTJs or DJT connectors, or those bolts, or those hangers for that matter up there. We're not going to need any of that. And that stringer is going to come up to the top of the column just like the other ones. The column's going to move forward to provide that support. You can see the column is still behind this skirting, but just kind of barely. But now the stringer header moves onto this, and then just pad that out with an extra 2x6, because this has to be at least 4 1/8 high. This leg here where it contacts at. But all this stuff, this one's sitting on top of those columns, so all of this just needs nailed together. And there is the bottom support for that 3/4 inch screening or skirting that comes up and goes behind the 1x10 fascia. So that's that. Sorry about all that. We have reached the end, I'm pretty sure. Thank you.